and another bet by the Russian terrorists on ballistics. For now, we have nothing to shoot them down with. Our Air Force has even stopped providing statistics on missiles in their reports, and the enemy is using this to the maximum. And besides their own Iskanders and Kinjals, they're attacking us with North Korean KN-23s. They are highly inaccurate and relatively cheap. So how many of them does the enemy have? Lesia Holovina on Must.
August 11th, a night attack on Zaporizhia. The Russian army struck the city with cabs, zircons, and also North Korean ballistics. Volodymyr Zelensky warned about the strengthening of cooperation between Russia and the DPRK, as well as the likely use of North Korean missiles, a day before the attack on Zaporizhia.
This is the first time in Russia's history that they no longer have a safe strategic rear. And this is the first time they cannot fight without reinforcements from North Korea. They are currently preparing to deploy an additional contingent of Koreans on their territory. They have received, just imagine, additional ballistics from North Korea.
The potassium nitride 23, an analog of the Russian Iskander, a missile, a new batch of which the Russian army recently received from North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. The stated strike range of such projectiles is approximately 600 kilometers. At the same time, this is not a high-precision weapon. The KN-23 can deviate from its target by as much as 15 kilometers, which makes them particularly dangerous for the civilian population. That is exactly what happened during the attack on the Dnipropetrovsk region at the end of July, when a North Korean missile with a huge margin of error hit a house in the village of Radoshne and killed the Voronov family, who had many children. The fact that the ballistics from Comrade Kim, which Russia is using against Ukraine, are inaccurate is also confirmed by the American think tank, the Institute for the Study of War. They explained why the Russian Federation is currently launching only a small number of such projectiles from the DPRK.
During night attacks, Russian forces are likely launching a small number of North Korean-made potassium nitride 23 ballistic missiles in order to test the missiles on the battlefield and improve their accuracy. Replenishing the Russian arsenal with additional North Korean missiles will allow Russia to intensify ballistic missile strikes on Ukraine in the near future without resorting to using its own stockpiles of S-400 and Zircon missiles.
The GR reported that the DPRK is deploying its own missile unit in the Voronezh region. This consists of 6 launchers and 40 ballistic missiles. And this is just the beginning. In total, in the near future, the DPRK is expected to transfer 120 such warheads to the Russian Federation, according to our intelligence. And there is nothing to shoot them down with, as there are no interceptors for the Patriots. And such cooperation between Putin and Kim poses a threat not only to Ukraine.
The more North Korean weapons we have here in Ukraine and in Europe, the more their missiles and soldiers are used, and the more they correct their imperfections and lack of knowledge, the greater the danger will be later for Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Philippines, and other countries in the region.
North Korea has been actively supporting Russia since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The first instances of potassium nitride 23 usage were recorded back in late 2023 and early 2024. At that time, the Russian military used them to attack Zaporizhia and Kharkiv. And Pyongyang has also sent thousands of its troops, weapons, and equipment to the front line. In return, it most likely received military developments from the Kremlin, including technologies for building submarines capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Pyongyang is not only actively facilitating Russia's war, but is also escalating tensions near its own country. For instance, just today, the DPRK military launched a ballistic missile in the direction of the EC. Lesia Holovina, We Ukraine United News Marathon.
Ukrainians have struck the last outpost of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea. President Zelensky confirmed a successful strike on the enemy's naval base in Novorossiysk. They used Polenetsia jet drones, Neptune missiles, and uncrewed surface vessels. They struck Russian air defense positions, piers, and port infrastructure. Our general staff reports the damaging of 4 Russian warships. Preliminary reports indicate damage to 2 frigates, the Admiral Makarov and Admiral Essen, a Buyan M project small missile ship, and the patrol ship Vasily Baikov. It's not the first time some of them have been hit. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that after the Ukrainian attack, the Novorossiysk grain terminal, through which up to a third of Russia's grain exports pass, has stopped operations. The Muscovites are accelerating the launch of their own Starlink analog, the Rassvet system. In half a year, they've already launched 16 satellites into low Earth orbit, and they plan to launch nearly 300 of them next year. Therefore, despite the fact that the Russians lost access to Starlink itself, once Rassvet is fully operational, it could become an alternative. What are we doing to prevent this from happening? Vasyl Mavchuk asked.
In Russia, the Rassvet project from the so-called 1440 Bureau has been reactivated. The Russians claim they're creating a full-fledged analog of the American Starlink, access to which they have lost. So they really need eyes on the front line. But will Rassvet actually become a real problem for us? Or is this just another one of Putin's no-analog equivalent projects? Let's break it down. Let's start with the name, because the Kremlin is just obsessed with branding. The number 1440 in the Bureau's name is the number of orbits the first Soviet satellite made around the Earth. But behind the pretty packaging hides ordinary technological plagiarism.
It was based and continues to be based on, well, let's say, the architectural foundations of Starlink, or rather, the very first Starlink satellites in general. Because today, technologically speaking, they, of course, can't even come close to Elon Musk and his developments.
Previously, the project was developed as purely civilian, but the war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine changed everything. Now it is a classified military program.
The Russian leadership began actively investing money into this production. And actually today, in essence, this is a...
The Rassvet satellite system is transitioning from purely civilian use to use by Russian government authorities and first and foremost the military.
Moscow has always exaggerated its military developments, but this time, fresh intelligence data forces us to take Russian satellites seriously. Our intelligence services are recording the enemy is not just rushing, they are ahead of their own schedules.
Moscow is implementing Rassvet, effectively a Russian analog of the Starlink system. And they started launching it much faster than their plans had anticipated. By March 2026, Russia had already launched 16 satellites into low Earth orbit. They will continue to launch others to create a constellation totaling 292 satellites in 2027.
The pace really turned out to be higher than expected. But at the same time, the Russians are already experiencing their first losses in space, even without the help of the armed forces of Ukraine.
There were reports that in the first batch of 16 satellites, one satellite, it seems, didn't make it to orbit because it simply burned up in space. We need to keep an eye on this in general, and in future similar cases, they will already be giving us information about the state of this development and the quality of the work done by Russian engineers.
But even if the Russians launch at least 100 satellites, it will create big problems for the defense forces. First and foremost for the Frontline, the enemy will be able to advance in a more coordinated and successful way.
This will also significantly change the actual aggressiveness of Russian strikes. They will be more difficult for us in terms of repelling such attacks.
Through their satellites, the Russians will be able to control their drones over all of Ukraine in real time. Right now, these 16 devices at an altitude of 500 kilometers provide only a few communication windows per day when they pass over the territory of Ukraine. And the more of them there are, the wider the window will be. So how do we counter this? Shooting down satellites in outer space is a scenario more suited to science fiction movies than reality. And besides, why hunt for devices in the sky if you can destroy the factories on the ground?
Strike the production facilities of this company that manufactures these satellites, Rassvet Bureau. Likewise, this means damaging the supply chains for components. This is what could preemptively cause damage to this project.
These are cyber attacks on the relevant structures involved in this Russian project. How to do this? Believe me, the specialists, cyber specialists, they know.
Besides that, we need to create electronic warfare systems for countermeasures. This is what presidential advisor Serhiy Flash Biskresnov is talking about. And he adds, if Russia starts using satellites for military purposes, Ukraine will be able to detect it. For now, the enemy doesn't have enough devices for this, but their production is ongoing.
In Germany, operations at Hanover Airport were halted several times due to an unidentified drone. The drone was spotted at Mate. It circled near the airfield for 2 hours, then disappeared somewhere. Because of this, 6 passenger flights departed late, and 1 cargo plane was diverted to another airport. This is not the first time unidentified drones have been hovering in the German sky. Recently, one of these hit the wing of a Ukrainian cargo plane at Leipzig airport, but it didn't detonate. The story of a soldier who couldn't live a civilian life, let alone abroad. So even after being wounded, he returned to the front again. A fighter from the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade with the call sign Rapper started in the infantry and then decided that his experience was needed in working with unmanned platforms. Today, he operates ground robots that save the lives of his brothers in arms while under fire.
He tried to live a normal life. After finishing his first contract with the armed forces of Ukraine, Mykola returned to his native Rivne and got a job. But civilian life felt oppressive, so he realized his place is where the fate of the country is being decided right now. He packed his things and signed a new contract, this time for 3 years.
Honestly, I couldn't have even imagined a year ago, when I was signing the contract, that I wouldn't be able to leave here. I had a deferment, but I didn't even want to leave. I just understood and know what is happening here. And somehow there was absolutely no motivation to go there, to leave our country.
The soldier's military path began in the famous Desna. 45 days of intensive training and tons of ammunition fired, from pump-action shotguns to heavy machine guns.
Everything went great. They trained us really well. They taught us how to use pump-action shotguns. They taught us, by the way, and it really came in handy, because as you know, it's a drone war now. FPV drones are flying around, so it really came in handy. The guys, by the way, shot down drones at combat positions.
Welcome to the baptism of fire.
And it was in Desna, back during training, that Mykola got the call sign Rapper for his creativity.
There was a marching song in Desna. And at first, when we were learning it, I tweaked it a bit in my own way. Especially, I tweaked the chorus. And so the commander gave me that call sign.
Fire the machine gun. Fire the machine down.
After being wounded in the infantry, Mykola was sent for training in Estonia. It was there that he first sat at the controls of European ground robotic systems. However, on the battlefield, the Edelweiss Brigade more often uses domestic developments, such as our termites. The soldiers say that they perform the same job, but are significantly cheaper and more compact.
In terms of terrain capability and the technical specs of the drone itself, you can't tell the difference between that expensive one and our Ukrainian one. Every day, the modifications to these drones are absolutely moving forward. They keep getting better every time.
Because the lives of the soldiers depend on it. The robot, which Rapper is operating, needs to deliver supplies and ammunition to the soldiers on the front line.
Every morning, somewhere around 3 or 4 in the morning, we get up, load the drone, camouflage it with a net, and we try to put fire extinguishers on it so that even if there's some kind of hit from an enemy drone, it could potentially put itself out. The mission lasts more or less about 4 hours, like 3, depending on where we're going.
Come on, come on, come on.
Let's go.
The Edelweiss position is clear. Equipment can be repaired or replaced, but warriors are priceless. That's why drones are sent to the most dangerous areas instead of people. Vasyl Momchuk, We Are Ukraine, United News Marathon.